The Miami-Nassau-Miami Searace, where men and equipment are pitted against the elements. The Searace, where legends are made. The dawn, and with it comes the promise of something new and exciting. That promise is fulfilled by Arano Powerboats. Born from the creative genius of the legendary Don Arano, who brought us Cigarette, Donzi, and Magnum. Arano Powerboats, now under the expert guidance of Gary Garber, has become the hottest fleet afloat. Call Arano Powerboats in Miami at 305-931-1533. Get to know an Arano. The Arano line of offshore powerboats. Not for everyone, but rather for those discriminating individuals who live in the fast lane. So call Arano for more information. For those who know, it's Arano. Searace, the event. Searace, the film. And now Searace, the book. The epic chronicle of the most exciting and dangerous sport in the world. Written by John Krause, world-renowned author and foremost authority on the sport of offshore powerboat racing. This hardbound color edition of the history of offshore powerboat racing traces the sport's beginnings from the turn of the century and takes you into the modern era of million-dollar racing vessels and their millionaire owners and drivers. Beautifully illustrated in full color, this first edition will quickly become a collector's volume.
Hi, I'm John Krause, and this is Searace, a history of offshore powerboat racing. I think it's the most complete work ever done on any motorsport under one cover. If you like fast boats, I think you'll love Searace.
Call 305-247-7547. That's 305-247-7547. Or send check or money order to John Krause Publishing, 20740 Southwest 248th Street, Homestead, Florida. Order Searace today. Miami, America's most southern metropolitan city. A veritable playground of sea and sun. Nassau, an island paradise in the Bahamas. A place where the jet set go to frolic under the Caribbean sun. And in between lies the mighty South Atlantic Ocean. A body of water steeped in legend and mystery. For it's here we find the dark blue waters of the Gulf Stream and the tongue of the ocean, in this mystic area known as the Devil's Triangle. Men of adventure have been coming here for many years to do battle with this particular part of the Atlantic Ocean. Men in offshore racing boats whose dream it was to tame this formidable body of water. Men like Gar Wood, the intrepid Commodore of World War I fame. The legendary Sam Griffith, Medal of Honor winner during the Second World War. Dick Bertram, world-renowned yachtsman and boat builder. And Don Arano, famous boat designer and marine innovator. Some of these men are gone now, but their legacy remains. And the ocean remains to challenge still another generation of offshore powerboat racers who would claim the title of the Miami-Nassau Searace. In 1986, the Miami-Nassau Searace entered the modern era of high-performance boat racing when its format was changed to make the race a round-trip event from Miami to Nassau and back to Miami, making it the longest and most grueling test of men and equipment in the world of offshore powerboat racing. John Krause, author of Searace, A History of Offshore Powerboat Racing, and founder-director of this event, believed the Miami-Nassau Sea Race should be the benchmark by which all offshore accomplishments should be measured. For under his guidance, the race had become 362 miles of open water, where only the brave dare to venture.
The Miami-Nassau Miami Sea Race is an innovation created 3 years ago by myself to accommodate this new so-called superboat that's been generated in America. The superboat is a boat approximately 50 feet long with unlimited horsepower with piston engines. We haven't got to the point where we're allowed turbines, but as you see behind me, the 63-foot Magnum, it's a diesel-powered, exotic engines. It's bringing the sport back offshore into blue water racing, long-distance, non-stop events which have died in the United States. We have a boat here that's essentially an express cruiser, what we call an express cruiser. This is a production boat, believe it or not. It does 64 miles an hour out of the box when sold by Mr. Ted Theodoli, who's our defending champion. He's been the only finisher for 2 years. But these boats can go for hundreds of miles without failure at high speed. This particular boat behind me can hit speeds in excess of 80 miles per hour, which is virtually unheard of.
The race begins just outside Governor's Cut near Miami's Biscayne Bay and runs out across the Gulf Stream to Gun Cay and Bimini. The course then runs over the Bahama Flats, a section of very shallow water as the racers approach the infamous tongue of the ocean, where, in drastic contrast, the water reaches depths in excess of 6,000 feet. Having reached the halfway mark at Nassau's Paradise Island, the course turns back out across the tongue of the ocean, the Bahama Flats, and the Gulf Stream as the racers return to the coast of the United States and the city of Miami. The 1986 event welcomed a small but dedicated group of racers as they took on the unusually calm waters of the South Atlantic. As the day progressed, it became apparent that this was the dawn of a new day in long-distance offshore endurance racing, as Ted Theodoli, owner and designer of the internationally famed Magnum yacht line, began to separate himself from the field in his 63-foot diesel-powered luxury yacht. At the end of the day, after an average speed of nearly 50 miles per hour and an elapsed time of 7 hours and 28 minutes, it was he alone who survived the ordeal and took the checkered flag. The day of the diesel had arrived.
Sort of substantiates in a way our thinking on building a boat that can do a little bit of everything.
The 1987 event presented much the same in the way of climatic conditions, with good weather and calm water out over the race course. The participants made final preparations as race time approached.
This is 63 Magnum. It's different from the one we used last year, being an exact same boat, but with different power. This boat here has a pair of Italian-built CRM engines, which are 18 cylinders, and they pull about 1,800 horsepower plus. And last year we had a pair of GMs that were pulling about 1,400 horsepower. So we have in total about 800 horsepower more than we had last year. The boat is lighter because the engines are lighter, and we have been able to do a better speed. As I said, if we can do Nassau in 3 hours, it's the fastest that has ever been done by a standard production boat. This is a standard production boat. It was now adapted for racing, but basically it's a standard production boat.
But this year's race was to be a carbon copy of the previous event, as Ted Theodoli, in a new 63-foot diesel-powered Magnum yacht, would once again be crowned the victor.
VIP boat right out there. I'm going to get him going.
Yeah.
will be a mile out the entrance. And I'm going to pull you up as close as I can to him and drop the green flag.
The Magnum team had averaged nearly 60 miles per hour in open water, with an elapsed time of only 6 hours and 11 minutes. The victory reaffirmed the fact that this was indeed a race of endurance, a race tailor-made for the Magnum's powerful yet reliable diesel engine.
We learned on the way back that we were alone. It happened before.
What about the speed and what about the conditions out there?
Absolutely flat.
It was calmer than last year by quite a bit.
Flat all the way across, and we were afraid that because of the flat water, we couldn't make it. You know, these other boats are so much faster than we are. But it's a question of endurance.
You're like the tortoise, right?
That's right.
What about the... This is a pretty fast tortoise. It moved along pretty good. Well, you got a better time than last year.
We shave in an hour and 15 minutes off.
What does a race like this prove?
I think that this is basically a motor yacht. It's not a race boat. It's a passenger boat. It's a yacht that is not being finished, and that we can go to Bahamas any place in almost racing time. You know, 60 miles an hour, which has never been done before.
This is about the time that race boats were doing it back around 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, where this would be a very good time for a race boat. Is this a good proving ground for engines? Oh, absolutely, yeah. And boats.
The water is very warm, and it doesn't help, you know, to cool off the engines. But they perform beautifully. These engines are incredible.
What about diesel against gasoline engines now?
Well, this is the answer. The diesel stays.
Much more reliability. Would you like to see more races like this?
Absolutely.
With diesels, yes.
Diesel.
And for
big
stock
boats.
boats.
It makes a hell of a lot more sense.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The dawn, and with it comes the promise of something new and exciting. That promise is fulfilled by Aerino Powerboats. Born from the creative genius of the legendary Don Aerino, who brought us Cigarette, Donzi, and Magnum. Aerino Powerboats, now under the expert guidance of Gary Garber, has become the hottest fleet afloat. Call Aerino Powerboats in Miami at 305-931-1533. Get to know an Aerino. The Aerino line of offshore powerboats. Not for everyone, but rather for those discriminating individuals. Written by John Krause, world-renowned author and foremost authority on the sport of offshore powerboat racing. This hardbound color edition of the history of offshore powerboat racing traces the sport's beginnings from the turn of the century and takes you into the modern era of million-dollar racing vessels and their millionaire owners and drivers. Beautifully illustrated in full color, this first edition will quickly become a collector's volume.
Hi, I'm John Krause, and this is Searace, a history of offshore powerboat racing. I think it's the most complete work ever done on any motorsport under one cover. If you like fast boats, I think you'll love Searace.
Call 305-247-7547. That's 305-247-7547. Or send check or money order to John Krause Publishing, 20740 Southwest 248th Street, Homestead, Florida. Order Searace today. As the 1988 offshore powerboat season began to take shape, an Italian racer driving a winged monohull was making a lot of noise both in the United States as well as abroad on the European circuit. His name was Fabio Buzzi, and he had won nearly every race he entered in his red Gancia de Gancia powerboat. The craft was powered by four 620-horsepower C-Tech diesels. The boat also featured special surface drives and an aerodynamic wing for better stability at racing speeds. As the date of the Miami-Nassau Sea Race approached, Buzzi recorded his last win of the regular offshore season by winning the World Championship in Key West, Florida. Carlo Bonami, owner of the boat, his son, and Fabio Buzzi were now ready to take on the big waters of the Gulf Stream and the tongue of the ocean. They were going after the toughest title afloat, the Miami-Nassau-Miami Sea Race.
Well, we have been testing the boat just a few miles outside and it's rough. We know that in the center of the Gulf Stream will be for sure worse. But then we have a flat area over the flat where we can have more speed, and I hope we can gain on over Theodoli what we lose on the very rough.
But first, they would have to deal with the competition, some very formidable competition. Two-time winner and defending champion Ted Theodoli of Magnum Yachts was back to defend his title in a newly designed 63-foot Magnum, powered by twin 2,000-horsepower quad-turbo Stewart & Stevenson Detroit diesels.
As you know, this race has been run for 2 years already. And when we were first told about the race, we never thought that we could compete because, you know, we don't build race boats. But we felt that we had a product at that time. We had a 63-footer that we were going to test for a client, and he wanted an extensive test. So we said, what better way to do it than actually do it on a real situation. So we entered the first Miami-Nassau in 1986, and we did our own thing. We never expected to be against anybody because we were basically 30, 40 miles an hour slower than anybody else, potentially slower. Well, we ended up to be the only one to finish, and we ended up to race. We are going to do it, to the difference of our competitor, we're going to do a non-stop, non-refueling. He'll have to stop and refuel, he doesn't have enough fuel. We can do it, we have enough fuel to go and come back, and probably we'll have plenty left. We've done it before. We know what we can do. Our speed is, compared to the race boat, is substantially less. But we should do well because of the size of the boat in rough conditions.
Custom marine forecast for South Florida out to 50 nautical miles. For Jupiter Inlet to Key Largo out to the Bahama Bank. Small crash should exercise caution. This afternoon, wind southeast 15 to 20 knots, seas 4 to 6 feet. Bay and inland waters choppy, a few showers.
And there was a newcomer, Barry Roth, driving an innovative new boat from Merlin Marine, powered by 3 high-performance diesels.
We're hoping to set all kinds of records this coming year with it. Going to get out there tomorrow and make a show for the American side and see what happens.
This year's race was shaping up to be a battle of new technology, of endurance. Indeed, this was to be the duel of the diesels. So the stage was set. The 3 diesel-powered boats would take each other on in the open waters of the Atlantic Ocean. As the big boats struck out on their course across the Gulf Stream, the faster Gancia de Gancia boat of Fabio Buzzi began to increase her lead until she had left the other two boats far behind. It would seem that even though the seas were running high, the Magnum and Merlin entries would be no match for the winged Italian raceboat, a tried and true veteran of many recent offshore victories. Bootsy and his young driver, Carlo Bonami, were running a flawless race. Their course was true, and their speed was constant, and at a record-setting pace. The other boats, now far behind, had to be content in the knowledge that somewhere, far out on the horizon, in front of them, ran the Gancia de Gancia team, en route to Bimini and beyond. As the lead boat surged through the rolling seas, they passed Gun Key on their port side and entered the Bahama Flats and calmer, shallow water. Bootsy increased their speed accordingly as he pushed the throttles to their limit, and this aquatic rocket literally flew across the light green waters of the banks. At this speed, they would soon reach the fabled tongue of the ocean, some of the deepest water in the world, as they approached the island of Nassau. Thirsty for fuel, the chase helicopters were forced to land at Nassau Airport, while the winged raceboat made its turn at Paradise Island and headed back out into the tongue of the ocean on its return leg. For them, the race was half over. Their only competition, over 180 miles of angry sea that lay between them and the finish line in Miami. 44 feet of Baltic racing hull, 4 high-performance diesel engines developing over 2,400 horsepower, propelled crew and craft through the rough water of the tongue of the ocean at a punishing pace as the team left Nassau far astern. The dawn, and with it comes the promise of something new and exciting. That promise is fulfilled by Arano powerboats. Born from the creative genius of the legendary Don Arano, who brought us Cigarette, Donzi, and Magnum. Arano powerboats, now under the expert guidance of Gary Garber, has become the hottest fleet afloat. Call Arano powerboats in Miami at 305-931-1533. Get to know an Arano. The Arano line of offshore powerboats. Not for everyone, but rather for those discriminating individuals who live in the fast lane. So call Arano for more information. For those who know, it's Arano. Searace, the event. Searace, the film. And now Searace, the book. The epic chronicle of the most exciting and dangerous sport in the world. Written by John Krause, world-renowned author and foremost authority on the sport of offshore powerboat racing. This hardbound color edition of the history of offshore powerboat racing traces the sport's beginnings from the turn of the century and takes you into the modern era of million-dollar racing vessels and their millionaire owners and drivers. Beautifully illustrated in full color, this first edition will quickly become a collector's volume.
Hi, I'm John Krause, and this is Searace, a history of offshore powerboat racing. I think it's the most complete work ever done on any motorsport under one cover. If you like fast boats, I think you'll love Searace.
Call 305-247-7547. That's 305-247-7547. Or send check or money order to John Krause Publishing, 20740 Southwest 248th Street, Homestead, Florida. Order Searace today. Having passed the relative tranquility of the Bahama Flats and its shallow water, the Italian team began the final leg of the Searace as they returned to the rolling swells of the Gulf Stream. They did not know that they were the only boat left in the race, but that didn't matter. They were in a race against themselves, against time and endurance, and against the endless pounding of a following sea that could break them apart at any moment. And yet, through all of this, the team sensed that somewhere, unseen on the thin line of the horizon, lay their objective, the city of Miami, and victory. Fabio and his hardy crew struggled on, through wave after wave, mile after jolting mile. Next stop, Miami and the checkered flag. The seas increased as they progressed across the Gulf Stream. They knew they were getting closer, but how close? Bootsy and Bonami peered into the distance. Nothing on the horizon. Not yet, but soon. Over 5 hours had elapsed since this grueling test began, and suddenly, there it was, the eastern shore of America, and the faint yet welcome sight of the skyline of Miami far out on the horizon in front of them. The buildings of Miami loomed larger. They passed the outer marker buoy and approached the jetty. With one last desperate rush of wind and wave, the sea finally relented and gave in to the victorious Italian offshore race team as they sped down the cut, past the cruise ships, and in towards the harbor at race headquarters. They had done it, 362.3 miles in 5 hours and 40 minutes. A new record time for the event, at an average speed of nearly 70 miles per hour. Who will win the next Miami-Nassau-Miami Sea Race? Only time and technology will tell. But one fact remains. All the greats have raced here, have left their mark somewhere out on the waters of the South Atlantic. This program is dedicated to these men and all the men who go down to the sea to race. For they are men of vision, men of daring, who go where few men go. Their names, like the legends of the sea, eternal.